Um, we are back for another of the pre-talks to the Knowledge Festival. Another reminder, 16th to 22nd of August, we'll have many experts from all parts of the world, all kinds of medical systems coming together to discuss how to enhance your immune system in times of a pandemic, maybe a good one. And we're still open for papers. So if you have anything to send in, just go to the website, knowledgefestival.org, and submit your paper. Maybe you will be part of it. If not, you can just follow the discussions on our live streams for free. So that's that. And today we are very happy to have Ms. Geetha Ghaliyavar with us, who is a sport nutritionist, you know, the high level ones, the International Olympic Committee, and registered dietitian, diabetes educator. She's a leading sports dietitian, university first ranker, a gold medalist, one of the few registered dietitians with a postgraduate diploma in sport nutrition. So, you know, you see many people who tell you they know something about nutrition, almost everybody and their mothers and their brothers. But here we have someone who has a deep knowledge of it with over 18 years of experience in academia, a guest faculty for Sports Authority of India, SAI, has contributed towards workplace wellness as a speaker, handled food safety, clinical nutrition, dietary counseling with holistic lifestyle management, and clinical research. And she is a columnist for print and electronic media, passionate about preventive nutrition and dietary practices to peak athletic performance. So we're really happy to have her with us. And also we just had the talk with Professor Mita Kotecha, and she went deep into the Ayurvedic ways of looking into food and health and the immune system. And we now have a real sport nutritionist, which is a probably even more specialized way of looking at things, how we can get the most out of food for a healthy and functioning body. So I'm very happy to have her on. And hello, a good morning to you.
Thank you, Wes, and I thank you and Vinayak and the team for having me on your program. And it's lovely to be here on the talk show. And thank you for the very lengthy introduction. And namaste to one and all from India.
Yeah, I mean, we're on a live stream. We have some time to give everybody an idea of who we are dealing with and why they might be. You know, it's also everybody's coming from a different place, and we really have basically all the kind of medical systems that we could get our hands on. Some of them are pretty, you know, hard to get by, but basically everybody, and they're coming up and they're um, telling us something on the topic from their point of view, and sometimes it's pretty different the way they look at it. So it's important for people to know who actually is talking, from which kind of school, from what place of the world, and etc. they're coming. So let me just start with a first question. Maybe you can give us some history into this idea of nutrition, of sport nutrition, and when it started and what you actually do.
So I think nutrition goes back to, I think, like I quoted in my previous talk show too, like Hippocrates said, let food be thy medicine. So I think it's, time immemorial that we've always looked at food to heal. And of course, like you aptly said, your previous guest who talked about Ayurveda. So I think now we have dietitians who are integrating with Ayurveda to understand the concept of the sattva of food, which I think is also very inbuilt by default setting in Indian food. And of course, sports nutrition, I would say, is still in its nascent phase in India. Unlike the Westerners, and there's a lot of work that's been done in US, Europe, Australia, particularly UK. Um, in the recent years, probably I'd say even not even 2 decades, that we've had dietitians who looking into sports nutrition and who have pursued this. And I think I have been very fortunate that 10 years ago, when I was contemplating on pursuing the International Olympic Committee, obviously being in UK, the fees is also in pounds. So now that over 5 or 6 years later, after 5 or 6 years, I was able to pursue that. Now, if you saw the concept of the diet was typically handled either by the coach, or athletes had very rudimentary knowledge. For that matter, even today, elite level or even recreational athletes or anybody who's into fitness really does not know. There's, like you said, not everybody is a nutritionist. So you do a 3 week course, you have a diploma, you call yourself a sports dietitian, or rather a sports nutritionist. You can't be a dietitian, you've got to study masters in nutrition for that. So there are a lot of people who advise on nutrition, from doctors to fitness experts, coaches, and today we have the new vertical of experts called influencers. So you just need to have a social media account and you could really talk a whole lot of
Mhm.
jargon. So but coming from an experienced and a qualified dietitian, I think it's making a lot of difference. And today, like I was highlighting, the way Sports Authority of India has really, prioritized looking at strengthening the nutrition department, and they have had sports dietitians as a part of the entire sports science team. No longer is the onus just on coaches or somebody else who would advise athletes. So in the last decade is, I think, where we've picked up momentum. And now we have a lot of dietitians who are also looking at the IOC, or the International Olympic Committee Post Graduate Diploma, which means it's a 2 years of intense program, and not just paying in pounds, but you also have to, put your time and effort and kind of imbibe all the application based, the assignments to the exam, which is very interesting. And I think somewhere from the time we've studied, the education system has changed, where it gives you the entire realm of how an application-based course is. So it's quite interesting, because there's no nothing right or wrong. It's just how you're able to logically reason, and there are several roads that lead to Rome. So as
Mhm.
long as you arrive at a solution, I think it's interesting that these courses really hone your thinking skills.
Mhm. So, would you say, I mean, maybe the way I experienced it, of course, as you said, it's always been a part of sports and also any kind of physical kind of understanding that food is important. But it seems also in the West that maybe the last 30 years are really moving in some directions, that people who are using their bodies in these intense ways should maybe have a certain diet, and coming from that also, that maybe everybody should have their own kind of diet in a way. But then as I said, looking back into the Ayurvedic science and the Indian past, and also other places where we have old medicine. This seems to have been a basic understanding of people, that people have different kinds of bodies, and different kinds of bodies need certain food, and it doesn't work in the same way with the other body. So and now because you were saying in India, it's picked up momentum in in the last 10 years. So would you say that the Indian nutritionist idea does go back to Ayurveda and other Indian medical systems, or is it actually the Western nutrition style, and then you kind of have your personal thing?
So you hit the nail on the head where you said you need to personalize, and I think today that is our mantra. Everything has to be individualized, and you really need to look at the culture, the medical conditions, the blood parameters of that person, and not to mention the basic body type, and not just the physical body frame, the skeletal frame, but how are you at digesting food? I mean, you may be somebody who may be slightly overweight, but you may be really fit. But unfortunately, we have an imprinting that if you are a lanky and a lean guy, you are far more healthier, and that's not necessarily true. So Ayurveda has definitely been around, and we have Ayurvedic doctors. But here, as dietitians now are trying to integrate in the last, in fact, in the pandemic, I have been seeing courses for dietitians, which has been offered by from Ayush to universities of these integrated disciplines, where they are learning to integrate this. And what we learned about sattvic, tamasic, and rajasic food, I think it goes even with our style of dietary practice, where we try and tell everybody, please eat healthy food, fresh food. I think even if we're following a different style of dietary counseling, but I think somewhere deep down, I think the principles and the guidelines remain the same. So also another question you asked was about how do you advise athletes? Right, athletes said somebody who is also into healthy eating, or somebody who's suffering from illness, obviously has to tweak or alter some food choices. Similarly, with the athletic community, there is definitely a different style of eating, because be it just your fruits or vegetables, but then you need to look at your macros, which are your rice, roti, or your proteins itself in a larger amount, and not to mention the exercise induced inflammation, which means that there is going to be some immunity suppression because of free radicals and inflammation. So which means that you obviously need to eat those mandatory number of fruits and vegetable servings a day, because otherwise your immunity is going to get thwarted.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, so you definitely have to strike a balance between all of these.
Mm-hmm. Now I'd be, because this gets to a point where I will jump over some questions and get to an important one, which is always so would you go for vegetarian also with athletes, or would you say, because people are saying, especially athletes, just cannot survive without meat, because obviously the kind of energy that is inside meat is very high, but on the other hand, you need a lot of energy to get that out. So is it working better for athletes? Could there function as vegetarians or vegans? Some of them are saying nowadays that even kind of high profile athletes are saying they're vegan. So what's your idea on that?
So this is definitely an intricate or a complicated one. Now, if you see the sattva of food, which I think was our opening statement, now if you see Ayurveda, they believe in the chi or the sattva. Now, that's something that we cannot debate about, and how the energy flows. So there are many outlook or many opinions about that. But in my practice, I have dealt with different kinds of athletes who practice vegetarianism. Thankfully, I haven't met a very strict vegan yet. I do have athletes who consume non-vegetarian foods. Now, like I aptly said, you need to individualize that, and you need to understand what is the criteria when you plan, say, a sports nutrition, meal plan. Now, what is the age? What is the culture of the family or the tradition? Like I know children who do consume eggs and chicken outside of home, but due to cultural practice, sometimes they're taboo to bring it inside the house. Now, so and like you aptly said, I think sometimes non-veg does receive a bad rap. I'm mostly 99% vegetarian because we do not prepare non-veg at home. Now, but that again is very a personal choice. I think in India there are wide spectrum of diet practices. So the red meat, obviously, or for that matter, non-veg itself has higher quality protein from the red meat, having more B vitamins, the more easily absorbable heme ion to creatine. The protein content can be quite easy when you plan a meal plan, and an athlete consumes non-veg. But we also have, in my practice, I've been very fortunate. I have also dealt with some national level athletes. For that matter, I have an ultra endurance athlete who's done these forest runs and who was practicing vegetarianism and also wanted to go vegan. Now, what happens there is you just have to understand that you could still cater to their needs, but you just have to look at larger meals because the quality of protein, the dals lacking methionine, the cereals lacking lysine, so complementation. Like in India, we typically do eat a combination, fermented, like pancakes called dosas and idlis, and or for that matter, even just your rice and beans, or your toast and beans, or rice and dal. So we have little, porridge styles of, food that we eat called khichdi, pongal. So Indian mixed meal is actually quite balanced, I'd say, because nobody just eats. Sometimes, yes, there are some who do eat heaps of carbohydrate, be it rice or similar style, because Indians do eat a lot of, consume a lot of carb heavy meal. But otherwise, if you are particular about the traditionally the way our meals were cooked, typically lunch or dinner will always be some combination of rice, rotis with a dal or a curry which is made with lentils, pulses, and there's always a lot of vegetables used. So if you do practice the traditional style of cooking, I think you are really sorted. You don't have to deviate much, and you can be ensured of healthy or balanced meals. But provided if you are an athlete, that's where the challenge of getting larger protein amount can be a hassle or a problem. So that's when we kind of look at supplements. And today we've thanks to what was that the documentary. The very famous documentary, which was quite stirred quite an uproar.
The vegan one, you mean?
Oh yes, yes. The
I
game
know.
changer. What was that?
Yes, something like that. Yeah, the game changer, I think. Yeah.
So yes, a lot of like you aptly said, there are a lot of guys who get influenced by what they hear and read on the internet. So, but there are definitely more challenges also to vegetarian or vegan diet. So that's why we look at supplementation. So you have now plant-based supplements, you the pea protein, the mixed proteins are better because then there is a balance of amino acids. So not just protein, but then in veganisms there is nutritional deficiency, typically being iron, because with a high fiber and a lot of phytic acid, so the absorption of certain important minerals come down, that being iron and calcium, magnesium, zinc. So, there are micronutrient deficiencies, or you could have B12 deficiency, because B12 you are able to, procure only from foods from either dairy or be it eggs or any other non-vegetarian choice of food. So you obviously have to look at, routine blood parameters or tests where you are able to evaluate every 6 months to a year, and you are then going to see, are you anemic, do you have low iron, B12, definitely vitamin D, because again vitamin D you get it only from egg yolks, a small amount, or cod liver oil or salmon. So very little of sun-grown mushroom, but that's vitamin D again. And so the vitamin D is not the potent or the most viable form of absorption. We need D3. So that's and another thing here with even vegetarians is, they get very overwhelmed with consuming egg yolks. So there's a lot of misconception to say that, oh my God, can I eat 2 eggs or 1 egg? Or I know some guys who only consume egg whites, not understanding that cholesterol is extremely important because it's also the vitamin D, the fuel or the raw material for vitamin D synthesis. And if you're a vegetarian and you randomly consume eggs, it's not going to matter because the liver will anyway produce that because it's so important for your existence. So, but a non-vegetarian guy, and if you're a male and you have history or family history of heart disease, you also consume large amounts of foods rich in cholesterol, be it seafood and prawns and red meat and a lot of processed food, cold cuts, so sausages. So that's where you kind of have to strike a balance and say, hey, I think I'm overdoing the eggs because I'm also doing a lot of other cholesterol rich foods. So understanding the entire the whole what do you say, the larger picture, I think is very important.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, definitely when you go into fanatic mode, then something will break apart. But you just touched on that, and this is, I think, very interesting to know, because when I want to understand what you actually do, right? I would think that you are looking at food, uh, which is then my next question, and you are uh, in a way determining what kind of thing that is, how much energy there is, what kind of ingredients are in that food, and how you can handle that. So that's the food part, and then you have the person, and you would say this is this kind of person. That's a different question. And then you would say we need this kind of food to get this person to that place. And that place is another thing that is interesting and should be. So what is that place? Where should the values be? Where should the things be? So that is the kind of triangle that would be interesting to me, to then understand what you're actually doing in the process of your work. But so how do you determine the nutritional value of a given food? How does that work? Is it going to through a laboratory, or is it just predetermined, or what is going on?
So we have something called the basic, the nutritional composition of foods, and we have our very rather the acclaimed institute or an organization, National Institute of Nutrition, and a lot of community work has been done by the Indian Council of Medical Research. So we already have the recommended dietary allowance, like the USDA. Similar to that, we have something called the NIN guidelines, and typically, very recently, we've just had a new update on the guidelines. So, which means the calories have been slightly reduced, and so, however, you have that as a ballpark reference, and you kind of evaluate if it's an adolescent child, or or somebody who's growing, versus somebody, say you also have young adults, somebody in middle age. Today sports is so integral about the way people are looking at lifestyle. It's not just exercise, and there are recreational athletes. So you really kind of want to evaluate, as you aptly said. I think we also have some questions coming in, so
Yeah, no problem. Just go on.
so as you aptly said, we definitely have a plan, and then we chalk out some objectives based on the dietary counseling, and we discuss what the requirement is or the inclusion criteria, to say, okay, these are my blood parameters, this is my age, this is my background, and we do a very detailed analysis, and it's a collaborative work to say that, okay, I think my objective should be, um, increase in muscle mass, versus say I want to lose my fat mass. So it really depends. Or somebody who has dyslipidemia, or they have higher weight, or they're looking at cutting weight, definitely because they may have high cholesterol or consume too much processed foods. The challenge is always eating fruits, vegetables for some. On the other contrary, some guys have problems eating good quality proteins, because they eat so much plant-based foods, your dals, pulses, and things like that. Or perhaps maybe they eat dals only twice a week, not understanding that you require proteins in every meal. So different area of challenges we come across with different athletes, and as you aptly said, so we chalk out some basic parameters, and we say, okay, this is where you are, and this is our goal. And we give some time and we counsel them to say that, look, in a scientific program, we see some very fancy influencers posts, or we have some guys who say, I lost 10 kgs in 2 months, and I'd be like, how is that even possible? Because it may not be very scientific. Because as is with muscle building, so is with even fat loss. Anything drastic is not advisable, nor safe, nor foolproof, because you don't know what you're losing. The target is not your muscle loss. The idea is muscle building, so which means that it needs to be done in a combination of weight bearing or strength training along with the right type of food. Because when we talk of macronutrients, somebody who does very stringent dieting or a lot of fat diets, that itself can be a challenge, because if you're not eating enough calories, you're slowing down your metabolism. Or if you are just restricting too much food and not doing weight bearing exercise, which means you're still losing muscle mass. And that's the crux of metabolism, is muscles, right? So your metabolism or metabolic rate slows down, so which means you're spending lesser calorie, you're sluggish, you're tired. And not to talk of the micronutrient deficiencies. So automatically you have restricted calorie intake, then there is obviously a cascading effect in a long term. You may have certain nutritional deficiencies. So that's where we kind of have to educate the client to say that you have to look at it in a very practical or a pragmatic manner to kind of have short-term goals, and also not just the diet. Then we kind of look at the supplementation if there's a nutritional deficiency, the lifestyle, the exercise, the sleep, because stress, a lot of guys, and generally our people, I think as humans, a bit of stress is good for us. Sometimes, especially me, I think there are many like me who perform better under stress. But eventually, is it just short-term stress? Is it chronic stress? The environment, the condition, your sleep pattern, and there's so many things that influences well-being. So I think we've got to kind of consolidate or put together various bits of your lifestyle. And I think eventually, when you give them that 4 to 6 months time, that's when they really are able to have tangible results.
Okay, so then basically you have the let's say standard way of taking the nutritional value of a food as these vitamins, these micronutrients, and
Nutrients.
yeah. Sorry, I shouldn't read and talk at the same time, because as you said, many questions are coming in. This is a interesting thing to talk about. So then you determine what is the right way to go about to reach a certain goal with a certain type of person. So in these times, because we're mostly concentrating on the immune system. So what's your idea? Which are the parts that are most influential on the immune system? What parts of a food are the important ones?
As I just mentioned in our previous question, so starting with just your adequate calorie intake and your food itself, cutting down too much rice, roti itself can be bad, So you need to be consuming, there is a certain amount of food that you need to eat. Just because you may be indoors or you think you're not exercising enough, overdoing calorie restriction for a longer duration itself can be harmful. So that can kind of suppress your immunity. Now, also adequate quality proteins, because your antibodies itself are deriving from your protein. So quality proteins, and talking of the good fats, which is omega-3. Now that is again typically the marine fish. In the vegetarians, we do have, the alpha-linolenic acid, and that could be your walnuts, your flax seeds, certain watermelon, pumpkin seeds, dark green leafy vegetables, small amounts, and the conversion is less than 15%. So chia seeds, hemp seeds, but these have to be consumed on a regular basis. So the good fats of the omega-3 also are anti-inflammatory, which means they do support the immune system. And then the just whatever is in season, or you just eat what is locally available, fruits, vegetables, because all your antioxidants, your pigments, your polyphenols, your lycopene, the colored pigment from the tomato, to anthocyanins, your quercetin from your apple. So fruits, vegetables are just extremely important, not just for your vitamins, which are ACE vitamins. They are antioxidants. Then definitely the vitamin D we talked about, because vitamin D really is like a fort, and it has or immune modulatory function, which means it's extremely important. So apart the vitamins, we've already talked of certain micro minerals, which are basically your iron, zinc, selenium. Now, especially with the pandemic, we're talking of zinc and selenium, and how important these micro minerals are, because they kind of bolster your immunity, or they keep them, synergistically they work with vitamin E. And so selenium also is a part of glutathione peroxidase, or certain enzyme, systems which kind of really protect you, or they're a part of the immune system. So I think if you're looking at just your intake of fruits, vegetables, proteins, and adequate calories in a healthy way, because the guidelines are half your food or your carbohydrate intake should be whole grain. So don't worry much about, oh, did I eat white bread today? Did I eat a burger today? Or, oh, should I be eating a pizza? And I'm sure with globalization, like you asked, do we do Indian diet? No, I'm not. Sorry, pizza was never Indian. And pizza, burgers. Today, with globalization, there's access to all kinds of processed food, and with science, technology, or food processing, there is just unlimited options to order on. Today we're connected virtually so easily, and with internet, that at just a given point of a contact of a mobile phone, you are able to order in. So it's and the spending capacity. Coincidentally, I was just talking about birthday parties yesterday, and I said, honestly, we did not. I don't even know if as a young child I had cake cutting. In our times at least. So, but today it's not just cake, but there's so much of fast food and junk food, and you cannot undo that. So don't worry much about did I eat chips today or pizza. But I think just as long as you're able to kind of lead a healthy lifestyle on a day-to-day basis, 5 to 6 days, and you're able to eat half your grains as unprocessed, be it Indian, rajmudi rice, which is the unpolished rice, or what typically was eaten, where the paddy is just pounded and you just kind of get the rice out. So millets, again, millets in South India, millets are very popular. So North, I think in North India, they eat a lot of whole wheat, atta, basically the flour and the flatbread chapatis. So as long as you're just able to eat healthy on most days, you really don't have to worry too much about the deviation of did I eat this, did I eat that. I think that's really trivial.
Okay, so I mean, would you say, because you were talking about vitamin D and also other, is it good, would you recommend extra intake of vitamin D or other vitamins that maybe are not in your food that much?
Good question there. Now that I think my principle is strictly based on a diagnostic blood test, because and also routinely we need to re-evaluate and then moderate the dosage, especially if you have a client you're dealing with on a long term. You just should not do something very, what do you say, ad hoc. Now, definitely, if there's a nutritional deficiency, it's sometimes difficult to manage with just food alone. Like I was mentioning, I had an athlete, or rather, she was looking at a wellness plan, and she said, "Do I need to take the supplement? I mean, but you exercising, you when you are already over middle age, and the metabolism slows down. There are nutritional deficiencies typically as you age. Now, to give the context of how, say, if an athlete is targeting 500 mg of magnesium in an intake for a day, that is the recommended dietary allowance. And when an athlete says, "Hey, but I'm eating so healthy, I eat everything, do I need a supplement?" So then I need to give them an example to say that if you need to still get that 500 mg of magnesium, you probably need to do quarter kg, which is like 200 grams of almonds. So you have to evaluate and see that, is this practical for me to eat that much to get the dosage that I would be probably needing based on my requirement or the intensity of my workout. And even for a wellness realm, say you have high blood pressure and you're more obsessed about the salt, the sodium intake, but you're not looking at the potassium which comes from, say, raw green leafy vegetables or nitrate rich beetroots, or magnesium that can lower your blood pressure. So I think it's important to educate people about, they sometimes are very prejudiced about a lot that they read, not understanding that there are a lot of other parameters which can actually be influencing their well-being. So supplementation is definitely required. Especially, I personally do follow a very scientific strategy. The IOC, that is the International Olympic Committee, also has their consensus statements where they very clearly give evidence-based, or Australian Institute of Sport, Group A, evidence-based, ergogenic age or supplementation for athletes. So these nutritional deficiencies, be vitamin D to calcium to iron, they all are proven and safe and evidence-based. And you have to kind of moderate that, based on the age, the requirement, what is your blood test. So you kind of use the age-appropriate and ethical dosage, and you re-evaluate that after a bit, and that's the way you kind of then adjust the dosage based on how the client is making progress. So supplementation is definitely needed, especially when we talk of 2 grams per kg body weight of protein sometimes, or you're a strict vegetarian or vegan and you probably looking at weight loss without that thermic effect or the higher amount of energy that the body is burning to use protein. So proteins is imperative in many ways. It's not just for athletes, but even for well-being, for weight loss, to control your appetite stimulating hormone ghrelin. So I think we kind of just, sometimes I know if you are also I think know too much, sometimes you scare the client and they don't understand too much of the scientific jargon. So sometimes just to keep it simple and just tell them, you've got to trust me. But once they achieve the results in the say about 8 weeks, typically that's the limited amount of time you need to even start noticing your progress. It doesn't happen overnight. I think that's something we really have to educate them, or start with a disclaimer to say that they'll often ask, when will I achieve my goal, when can I get my objective, when can I lose, and how much weight will I lose. So it's always a complicated question, and I wish I was God. So we have to tell them that it's very personal and every journey is different, but as long as you're doing well. They're obsessed about weight, they do not realize that the stamina improves, they do not fall sick, they have better immunity, they sleep better, they get stressed less. I think these are more important criteria when you are tracking progress.
So, I mean, this is a very kind of heated argument when it comes to supplementary stuff, of course. So now we're saying the message is just relax and ask someone who knows, and maybe just after some time you feel it, what happens when you have something in your system, and then go with knowledge and brains. So the other thing that you were talking about, which brings me to a question that's always interesting, because of course you were talking about fish and the omega-3 um, oils, and you know, we all know fish is such a great uh, you know, place for getting all kind of nutrients and vitamins and energy. But nowadays, we do have the data on fish being in such a polluted kind of environment that we find high levels of like mercury and other toxic elements in the fish. Especially the bigger fish, they can, you know, put it back in their muscles and keep it with them for a long time. So
Biomagnification, yes.
so yeah, so what is your idea on that? Because on the one hand, of course, you need the food, and then also some people are really you know, living like Japanese people, or you know, some countries are living of the fish. So what's your idea maybe on that? How could one get around that?
Uh, As you aptly said, I think fish is a great addition if you're a pescatarian and can consume fish. Choose the oily fish, which are typically the smaller fish. In India, the sardines and mackerel are quite affordable, fish. And the smaller they are, the better, because there's lesser mercury contamination. And like you aptly said, the larger fish, shark, tuna, the tuna, king mackerel, tilefish. So these are the ones that have been very, or that's what the data suggests, that these have higher mercury content. So try and avoid those fish. Wild salmon is of course the best, because they grow, you know, obviously in the environment. But of course, as Indians, when you are paying for just a fillet of about, say, I don't know, maybe an ounce or so. So it's very pricey fish, and unless and until you could afford to eat that on a regular basis, so probably I think the safer bet would be that you want to look at sardines and mackerel. So obviously you may get just less than 500 mg of omega-3 if you're eating the tiniest of the fish, but if you eat a salmon, probably you'd kind of bump that up, and you could get anywhere between, you know, 1,005 or 2,002. So the guidelines are try and eat oily fish 2 to 3 times a week, but it really depends on the type of fish again. Oily fish gives you omega-3 because of the PUFA, the polyunsaturated fatty acids. I think Indians, unfortunately, though our food is really versatile and or rather quite diverse, I must say, because every region, every state, we're such a vast nation. I myself haven't tried even half my cuisine in my country. Having said that, um, uh, we do have a lot of cooking, unlike the Mediterranean, and you know, thankfully, like you said, with internationalism, I do enjoy my, you know, my tossed salad, and you know, the balsamic vinegar, or it could be the extra virgin olive oil. But we do have our lovely oils. But I think the audience needs to understand the pro-inflammatory oils of the PUFA, the omega-6. I think we Indians sometimes unintentionally overdo it. There's obviously, a lot of cheap food available, a lot of fast food, snacking. I'm not very sure, Wes, if you tried our Indian chart. Okay, it's something to die for. So there's a lot of street food, which called street food, but we have restaurants that serve them. So the chart, and you know, typically I think that's deep fried. So there's a lot of trans fats that are formed because they're the unhealthy man-made fats. The omega-6 are the pro-inflammatory, which means the sunflower oil, which is typically used in every household unintentionally, is actually a very, very harmful oil. So you avoid that. But they're the amazing healthier oils, the cold pressed, you know, mustard oil, which was typically always used. I mean, you ask a North Indian or Northeast, I mean, of course, even now we use that here in down south of India. So the cold pressed mustard oil, and now cold pressing is the, you know, now people are aware, and people do not mind going that extra mile, and you know, they invest in quality grocery or ingredients. So cold pressed sesame oil, that's till oil, very popular in Oriental cuisine. So in Asia we do use a lot of that, and Indians do use that, you know. So then we have the cold pressed coconut oil. Quite popular world over now. But of course, I think as Indians, we've always used that. So look at these healthier oils, and definitely the omega-3, because that's the oils that I just mentioned. Though coconut oil is a saturated oil, but it's extremely heart healthy because it increases the good cholesterol, HDL. Whereas the other oils I talked of, the sesame oil, the mustard oil, they are the monounsaturated fatty acids, which means they're very heart healthy. And the omega-3, we're talking of the marine fish. They are the anti-inflammatory, which means that they're very, very important for preventing the free radicals or the entire cascading effect of how the aging process can kind of start off with all the pollution. And so I think if you're vegetarian, we do have the vegetarian form, be the kelp and seaweed, but of course you've got to understand you need heaps and heaps of it to put it in the capsule form, so they're awfully expensive. So as long as then you're looking at consuming some dark green leafy vegetables on a regular basis, but it's a very, very tiny amount that's available there.
Very good. So we we got some hints at maybe we can put olive oil into that basket too, because in Europe it's a lot more expensive to get maybe mustard oil or sesame oil than olive oil.
Absolutely. And one tip here also, there has been no match to extra virgin olive oil.
Yeah.
So I have been reading up, and as much as we want to use our cold pressed coconut oil, it has antibacterial property, immune boosting, or it supports our immunity. There's medium chain triglycerides. It's an amazing oil. But as much as I'm proud Indian, but I think I still have respect for extra virgin olive oil because I do not think there's any other match to that.
Right. So no, I was just saying to have our European or American viewers in that too, because it's sometimes hard to get those good oils, and as you said, some plant oils are not really healthy for the body, and people are using it on a daily basis as the standard, as you said, sunflower oil or other ones also in Europe. So and people are in that belief that it's a healthy thing they're doing. They're using kind of that and not butter or even ghee, which they think might be animal based and therefore not that good. So we got a good point in there. So now we talked about the toxic parts of maybe a fish. Now, what food industry chemicals are detrimental for health? Well, what would you say the kind of, I mean, now we talked about processed food, and not only the environment is maybe full of pollution, but we put them inside the food. So what kind of chemicals we should look out for on the paper and avoid
So
that?
I had a gentleman write to me on my social media handle because I was talking about omega-3 and fish. He said you will also get a lot of plastic, the plastic residue. So I told him, my dear friend, we are breathing microplastics.
Yeah.
Forget about eating them.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, with urbanization, there is definitely a challenge of, these pollutants. And with processing, unfortunately, we cannot deny that. I think there is an unavoidable adulteration or contamination sometimes, intentional or unintentional. And that's the reason I think we really need to look at whole foods. And I think today we have the concept of clean eating. So do eat, something that kind of is a one ingredient food. It could be your nuts, it could be just your fruit. I think it's so important that you kind of moderate the amount that you need from a packet. So anytime there is processing and packaging, obviously there are additives, there are flavoring agents that are used. And I think, like you said, it's challenging, like margarine. I remember at a point when, we were young, my mom would use something called as dalda. Dalda was nothing but vanaspati, which is hydrogenated fats, which is today's current margarine.
Right.
they're tasty because just with the advent of modernization and industrialization, I mean, the food just stayed more tastier, and probably the shelf life improved, and that's how hydrogenation of oil started, right? So, but today, even today, we do have hydrogenated fats used in processed foods because the the oils go rancid, or they have an off flavor after a certain time. So anything that you eat from a packet will come with its additives. So I think that's something I cannot say that we can refrain from, because sometimes on rarity, even I do eat from the shelves of a supermarket. Occasionally, but rarely. But I may be an outliner. But there are a lot of guys who do not have house help, domestic help, who probably do rely on ordering in, or takeaways or processed food. So I think my suggestion here will be that yes, there are a lot of chemicals that are used in the process of preservation, and definitely the challenge of these high palatable foods, which means they're made to be tasty, they're made to have that the endorphins released, which means that you do get a high when you eat those foods. You do have a lot of sugar and whatever flavoring agents used in them, because then that's the reason I think that kind of gets you going back to that. And there are trigger points released in the brain. So that's a different science altogether, and I think as a dietitian I just know the tip of the iceberg. So like I tell all the clients, just there's nothing that you cannot eat. Please do eat everything, donuts to whatever. Like, say for example, if somebody tells me I feel like eating ice cream or cake, I cannot tell her you eat, say, a mango, which is in season now, because honestly, that kind of doesn't match. It's not in the same food group. But we just have to educate them to say, okay, you want to eat ice cream. Could you eat, say, a frozen yogurt? Or, you're giving them a similar option, but something healthier in the same basket. If you want to eat a cake, okay, maybe you don't want to eat a cake that's got too much whipped cream, or too much of sugar syrup. So probably would you like to do a cheesecake, or which has lesser cream, lesser fat, lesser calorie? You just have to find something in the same basket which is an alternative to a healthy version.
Okay, so yeah, it's a tough job. You have to you have to know about the the
Budgeting.
yeah, about the nutrition amount on a way, and the setup of the whole food, and then sorry, try to find ways for people to take the next step, maybe into something better. And I just didn't want to bother you with the chemicals and the bad part, but it feels like it's just part of food nowadays. And
True.
it's not that only we should know what we should eat, but also maybe what we should not eat. But then coming to a final one, because we're taking up some of your time now. Now, getting back to the immunity part, which is our main goal with this Knowledge Festival, the immune system. For improving your immune system, what, how much food, and in which way? Is there a baseline that you could give us, how we could handle that? That is the best way to go forward.
As I said, the takeaway message is, balanced diet, eat everything, prioritize whole foods, fruits, vegetables, grains, plant-based diet. So coming to that, I think we now know that the prebiotics, or the post prebiotic, the probiotic. So the plant-based diets itself have so many benefits for immune system, not just from the colored pigments, the flavonoids, the antioxidants, the microminerals, which we've already talked about, but the fibers, you know uh, from even cooling of the potatoes to the plantains and rice, the resistant starch, where on cooling it kind of becomes, it cannot be digested, which means the bacteria will ferment that in your large intestine or colon. So the high fiber diet, the plant-based diet or the Mediterranean style of diet also has a direct impact on your immunity, because if you're eating we just talked about processed food, try and minimalize that. If you're probably, like I said, just because then you don't say a dietitian said eat cake, I'll eat cheesecake every day. No, that's not what I'm referring to. You just kind of have to, restrict that and enjoy that. Do kind of indulge, and on occasions and rarity, that could be very rarely, once or twice a week, but not on a day-to-day basis, because the more processed foods you eat, the more trans fats you eat, the more pro-inflammatory foods you eat, the high sugar, the refined grains, and anything that comes in a packet, and definitely the processed meat. Today you see a lot of Westerners talk about grass-fed, organic. The kind of quality of the meat also is important. So if you're eating a whole lot of char-broiled meat, which could be your, like in India we have something called as tandoori, which means it's barbecued. It's just a synonym to the same word. But if you're eating tandoori foods, again, they're charbroiled, which means that there is a change in the protein and the structure, and I think if I'm not mistaken, the hydrocarbons, those are cancerous, like excessively overdoing red meat, cold cuts, and preserved meats like your sausages. Now, why I say plant-based diet is because these good fibers, where the body cannot absorb, the insoluble fiber, now they come from your whole grains, your pulses, fruits, vegetables, nuts. They have the good fiber in them. That's a prebiotic, and you have certain bacteria that can ferment that in the gut. And unfortunately, if you are alive, you are going to have some bit of side effects of fermentation. So which means a high amount of plant food is going to lead to a lot of flatus or gas. So that's a side effect of it, but it's still healthy, because the good, the short chain fatty acids that these bacteria release from these fibers, the acetates, the butyrate, the propionate, or whatever these good things are, these short chain fatty acids itself not only give energy to the the cells of your intestine, the colon, but then now today we understand the gut and the brain axis. Now with the pandemic, we're talking of coronavirus, we're talking of the gut and the lung axis. And also with scientific evidence, we know that when you combine the good bacteria, the probiotics, which means the live culture. In India, curd, we always typically finish meals with curd, because curd, of course, that's again in vegetarians or for somebody who consumes dairy. So curd, or what you Westerners call as yogurt, it's a fermented food, which means that the best lactic acid bacteria in them, and it's pre-digested, so the lactose is already broken down, it's light on the stomach. So the good bacteria, the live culture, the live bacteria, then combined with these, we call them symbiotics. So the good bacteria combined with the fibers, the prebiotics. And now there are many ways you could get the good bacteria, from sauerkraut. In the Asians we have tempeh, the fermented soy. Indians we have curd, pickles. Even the Westerners use pickles in brine, the salted ones, the olives. We're talking about just olive oil, right? The olives, the gherkins. So anything that's pickled in brine, the salt fermentation. So there is these good bacteria, the lactic acid bacteria that are formed. Even in India, a typical farmer or anybody in the rural setting would not have a refrigerator, right? So they would leave the leftover food or the rice just with a layer of water, and that would ferment overnight, and they would consume that in the morning. And today this is being bottled and sold in US. So there's so many simple ways you could look at consuming probiotics. So symbiotics are basically when you eat live culture, the good bacteria is probiotic, and the prebiotics, the good fiber, the resistant starch from oats, barley, bananas, okay, onions. Westerners use a lot of these asparagus, so garlic. Now these are all the prebiotics. So you use, and resistant starch comes from cooling of potato, rice, and plantains. So these actually can have a influence on the way we feel, our mood, the gut-brain axis today, what we're talking of, how they can influence the mood by preventing depression, certain neuro degenerative diseases like your Parkinson's, the way you respond to stress, So there's a lot of research today how even the good bacteria that we eat, typically from these fermented foods and the plant-based food, can even prevent the upper respiratory tract infection. And we have evidence of scientific, data and studies from that. And that's the gut and lung axis of how these short chain fatty acids can influence neurotransmitters, hormones, so much so that today we believe that it can influence even your appetite stimulating hormones and can control weight, diabetes, prevent cancer. So there is some kind of very intricate connection from the second brain being your gut and definitely your brain. So there is a powerful immune influence from eating these foods.
Wow, that was great. You took all the little questions that had come up in the chat and put it into your answer, which is great. It just gave us the
On that
whole
note, one
round.
thing also I would like to just highlight, today we have a
Yeah.
newer concept called postbiotics. You have supplements available for this, not just the prebiotic
Mhm.
inulin fiber, the probiotic, drinks that you get and shots. Today we have postbiotics. Postbiotic is naturally nothing but the dying cells of these good bacteria in your gut. And even the
Mhm.
remnants of these, waste cells in some way have an immune influence. So I think this is very interesting learning.
Right. I mean, yeah. I mean, if you don't want your body to do anything on its own, then you you can get it from outside. Prebiotics, probiotics, postbiotics. It's beautiful. Um, so well, we've come to an end. It was just great. I think I, for one, took away a lot, and it was very interesting to understand how sport nutrition actually probably works. And yeah, uh, I'm glad we did that this way. So we had some free talking points, and we will have you. We also have you on the advisory board of the Knowledge Festival. So we're happy to see you at some point there too. And with that, I thank you again, and I say goodbye for today.
Thank you, Wes. Thank you, Vinayak.